Campbeltown Scotch Whisky is the smallest of the Scotch whisky regions with only 3 distilleries, but has a dramatic story. Once the whisky capital of the world, dozens of distilleries like Epernay was to Champagne, Longrose Street, it's Lavandou de Champagne, so grab a dram, I'll take you there. Let's dive in. Hello, Hendo here. Welcome to Scotch Whisky Campbeltown Region Deep Dive. In this video I will share my insights to the whiskiest place in the world. The Campbeltown malt was the muscle in the blends, so I call it the Arnold Schwarzenegger of whisky. Sections I'll cover are geology, then and now, politics, players and people. First up, geology and geography, Dalradian Rock Argyll Group and Southern Highland Group, sedimentary coalfields at Magnaharris. Peat is the first step in the formation of coal, and there's plenty of peat on Kintyre. Old red sandstone of southern Kintyre from when Scotland was a subtropical region below the equator. Crosshill Loch water source is Dalradian Strat and headland Mull of Kintyre. Kintyre is a peninsula, not an island. Mull is the tip of that peninsula, the most southerly part of the Highlands, west side of the Highland boundary fault, shaped by glaciation in the last ice age. Campbeltown is a deep water harbour sheltered by Davar Island, trading hub between Glasgow, the Hebrides and nearby Antrim coast of Northern Ireland. Kintyre means head of the land and often called the Garden of Argyll. Plenty of fresh rainwater, local barley, fertile soil and peat. Soils in Kintyre range from sandy, peaty, gravelly and mossy, resulting in excellent drainage. A temperate climate thanks to the Gulf Stream. It's perfect for making whisky. To then and now, Campbeltown, the wee toon, been settled for 7,000 years. Fergus from Ireland took these lands in 503 AD. Antrim, Scotia brought Christianity. This place has seen it all. Ancient Picts, Irish and Norse. Seat of the Kings of Dalrada, renamed Kilkerran, then Kinlochkerran. The first reference to Campbeltown whisky, 1591. Campbeltown became a borough. Act of Parliament 1597, Campbell's first registered the name 1609, but Lochhead was used up until 1860s. Rent for a Crosshill farm in 1636 included 6 quarts of aquavit, the water of life. Sanda Island was a smuggling stronghold at Grogport Smuggler's Cave, links by sea between Ayr and Ireland. Local distillers complained their trade was being damaged by Irish whisky imports. Between 1797 and 1817 there was no legal distilling. Half of Maltster John Colville's customers were women. By 1814 there are 22 distilleries in Campbeltown area. 1817 the first legal distillery, aptly named Campbeltown Distillery. Locals grouped together to form distilling companies. Lucrative illicit trade tailed off after the 1823 Act. In anticipation, the Duke of Argyll built a hold reservoir at Crosshill Loch in 1820. In the 1820s, steamboats arrived, changed local fortunes. Springbank opened 1828, Scotia 1832. By 1835 there are 29 active distilleries, peaked at 34 distilleries. Campbeltown was thick with peat smoke by the sheer scale of whisky production. Magnaharris coal mine opened 1856, a cheap fuel source for whisky distilleries. Herring needed cask cooperage for transport to Glasgow. Fishing, mining, steamboats and distilling drove the town to above 9,000 people. Industry made it the highest income per capita in the UK. Steamboat tourism brought tens of thousands of visitors and casks could reach Glasgow in 9 hours. Barley from Ireland or the Baltics and wine casks from Europe. The Paterson Brothers crash was an omen. The turn of the 20th century. Magnaharris Railway opened 1906 to fuel Campbeltown's distilleries, but the winds were changing. Blenders in Glasgow started to prefer Speyside and Islay, yet Campbeltown distillers kept overproducing and some wasn't great quality. World War I stopped production, then US Prohibition, domestic and export sales plummeted. The Great Depression, they all closed. Magnaharris coal mine closing 1923 was the final nail in the coffin for many distilleries. Scotia and Springbank reopened in 1933, then the Second World War came. The devastating collapse forced families to leave. After the industry slump in the 1980s, Campbelltown distillers took control of their own destiny. Springbank's fifth generation owner, Headley Wright, has guided Springbank to not focus on volume, and Glen Scotia was revived. Calmac ferries brought more tourists back in 2013. The 1913 Picture House has been refurbished. Campbelltown Creamery was Meadowburn Distillery, originally turned into creamery 1920s, now McFadden's Transport. 12 miles north of Campbelltown, Ben and Turk Distilleries are planning to build a whisky distillery early 2022, release their first whisky in 2025. I'm not sure if that'll fall into Campbelltown or Highland region. In recent times, Campbelltown distillers have consistently, skillfully crafted quality spirit. It's globally revered, and Glen Scotia just won Best Whisky in the World. Now to politics. Various acts of parliament, market forces impacted Campbelltown. Its location between Highlands and Lowlands as an intermediate district. You can see from this map, 1799. The Highland line emerged from the 1784 Wash Act, confusing local taxation. Illicit distilling flourished in Kintyre, so the 1823 Excise Act turned an illegal whisky boom into a legal one. 1909 Lloyd George Great hike in whisky tax affected sales. Campbelltown's heavily peated whisky became less popular. Post World War I duty hikes in 1920 US prohibition was a hammer blow for exports. 17 distilleries closed in 1920s Campbelltown. In 1998 the Scotch Whisky Association told Campbelltown that 2 distilleries wasn't enough for it to be called a whisky region. Springbank owners noted the Lowland region at that time only had 3 distilleries, Glenkinchie, Auchentoshan and Bladnoch. So in 2000 they started refurbishing Glengyle Distillery, reopening 2004 as Kilkerran Single Malt. Since their neighbour owned the rights to Glengyle, Springbank is not a member of the SWA. An A.S. MacDonald's 1930 whisky book notes Campbelltown malts are separate from Highland malts, the double bases of the whisky orchestra. Campbelltown is a protected locality for Scotch whisky distilling under the UK's Scotch Whisky Regulations 2009. Now to the players. There's only 3 active distilleries. Their combined output is small, less than 3 million litres, and in 2020 pandemic restrictions, production halved for Springbank, so expect that to affect future stocks. First up is J&A Mitchell Springbank Distillery. Springbank is independent, family owned, dating to 1828 on the site of Archibald Mitchell's illicit still. Until the 1960s, distillers supplied blenders like Johnnie Walker. Everything at Springbank is done on site, malting the barley right up to labelling the bottles. It's handmade whisky. Springbank whisky is distilled 2.5 times at about 12-15 ppm. The 10-year-old is an industry classic, as is a 12-year-old cask strength that comes out twice a year. They also make Hazelburn whisky, which was its own distillery back in 1825, launched in 1997 as unpeated triple distilled. And also Longrow, another previous distillery up until 1896, is peated, often finished in wine casks. Longrow since 1973 is double distilled at about 50 ppm. The barley dried using peat-fired furnace. It's a small output compared to other regions. Global releases mean you need to be on a list or society member to have a chance to buy some of the Springbank releases. Glengyle was originally founded in 1872 by farmer William Mitchell after a quarrel with his brother. Springbank Distillers owns Kilkerran Single Malt. Frank McHardy, head of production, is instrumental at Glengyle, using equipment and stills from Ben Wyvis Distillery, deliberately making a lighter spirit, lightly peated, opened 2004. Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength has become a modern classic. Springbank plans to leave ownership to the town. The Mitchells also own Cadenhead Independent Bottler, 1842, originally in Aberdeen. They bought it back in 1972 and have several stores in UK and across Europe. Now to Glen Scotia, founded in 1832 as Scotia Distillery. Scotia, the name of the people, came from Ireland. One of the smallest Scotch whisky distilleries, and small output like Springbank produces unpeated and distills peated for 6 weeks of the year. It's closed 1930. Reopened 1933, repeated a few times, still changed hands and bought in 2014 by the Loch Lomond Group, who really put it on the international stage, sold in global travel retail, golf sponsorships. Master distiller Ian McAllister produces some fantastic liquid, recently earning their 25-year-old best in the world. The 15-year-old, the double cask and Victoriana have become stable favourites. In 2019 the group was bought by Hill House Capital. Now there's some bottlers of Campbelltown whisky, including Douglas Leng makes the Gauldrons, Dallaroon by Lost Distillery, there's local independent bottler Watt Whisky, and there's retailer bottlings. A side note on closed distillery locations: Benmore Distillery is now the town's bus garage, Lochhead Distillery is now Tesco Supermarket, the original Hazelburn Distillery and Raleighan Distillery site is close to the local Co-op supermarket and car park, Ardlusa and Glen Nevis behind it. Some distilleries are where houses are today, not just buildings gone. It was a tragic loss of heritage. Many ask me around the world, why did they let this happen? Well, when they closed, they had debtors to pay, stock was sold in auction almost immediately, buildings demolished for tax reasons. There's no call to preserve anything. It was a fight for survival, and distillers were forced to leave the town with their families to find a better life. It was very sad. Now to people. The families of Greenleys, Colville and Mitchell are famous in Campbelltown distilling folklore. But of special note is Robert Armour, a local plumber who adapted to stillmaker in 1811. Just as the boom kicked off, he made in the illicit distilling apparatus. Usually less than 40 gallons, the still consisted of 4 parts: the vessel, head, arm and worm. His still books reveal customers normally groups of 3 to 7 forming a company. He traded across Kintyre. His well-concealed books give us a fascinating insight today. In 1823, Colville mentions letters which came from settlers in Ohio, USA about 1825, in which Campbelltown immigrants were reported to have found employment in producing the same kind of whisky as they had formerly made in the borough. Quite incredible. Nowhere had so many distilleries operating in such a concentrated place, but it's good to see Campbelltown whisky now more sustainable and in safe hands. Today is Campbelltown Malt Festival, virtual just now, but I highly recommend you visit and explore the new Kintyre 66 Circular Road route and enjoy a wee dram in the Ardshiel Hotel Whisky Bar. So tell us what you think of Campbelltown whisky. Put your favourites in the comments. Watch the other region videos in the series. And if you're interested in projects, contact us at hendotalks.com. As always, welcome your feedback. Hope this was useful to you in some way. And until next time, thanks very much for watching.